The women chosen only to bear inbred children, the darkest curse ever revealed. Hidden within the mist-shrouded valleys of West Virginia's Appalachian Mountains, a generational nightmare unfolded over decades that would only come to light in the autumn of 1973. The Blackwood family had established themselves as fixtures in Monroe County since the mid-1800s. Their sprawling property nestled deep within isolated woodland, miles from the nearest town of Alderson. Our investigation begins with Margaret Blackwood, born in 1952, who, at 21 years old, stumbled into a local doctor's office carrying an infant with disturbing physical characteristics. Dr. Howard Reynolds, now 87 years old, recounted to us what he witnessed that day. She seemed terrified, that poor young woman. The child she brought in had an unusually shaped skull, facial asymmetry, and was experiencing seizures. When I began asking standard medical history questions, Margaret became agitated and evasive. Before leaving abruptly, she whispered something that haunted me for years. "This is what happens to all the children born at Blackwood Hollow." What Dr. Reynolds couldn't have known was that he had just glimpsed the edge of a familial nightmare spanning generations. County records revealed that the Blackwood property had become increasingly isolated after the Great Depression. By the 1950s, the family had withdrawn almost entirely from community life, appearing only occasionally to purchase supplies. Former Sheriff Thomas Miller, who served Monroe County from 1968 to 1982, described what happened next. After that doctor reported his concerns, we began investigating. What we discovered at that property still disturbs me to this day. 3 generations living in a compound of sorts, with strict hierarchical rules. The most disturbing aspect was how they treated the women in the family. Investigation revealed that the Blackwood patriarch, Elijah Blackwood, had established a twisted familial structure during the isolation of the Depression era. Women in the family were designated for specific purposes, with some chosen solely for reproduction with male relatives to maintain the purity of the bloodline. This practice continued even after his death in 1962, with his son Jeremiah enforcing these same practices. The psychological impact on these women was devastating. They were denied education, confined to specific areas of the property, and indoctrinated with distorted religious beliefs that justified their treatment. The resulting children often suffered severe developmental and physical challenges due to the genetic complications of consanguinity. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. If not, subscribe now to uncover the darkest family secrets that society tries to hide. These historical investigations reveal uncomfortable truths about humanity that will change how you see the world. The true extent of the Blackwood family's isolation became apparent when investigators gained access to their property in late 1973. What they found was a self-contained world with its own distorted rules and hierarchy. The family compound consisted of a main house where Jeremiah lived with select male relatives, and 3 smaller structures where different groups of women and children were housed according to their designated purpose within the family. Most disturbing was the discovery of detailed journals kept by both Elijah and Jeremiah Blackwood, documenting their beliefs about bloodline purity and their systematic approach to family reproduction. Dr. Elizabeth Harmon, a geneticist who reviewed the case in the early 1980s, explained the devastating consequences. The Blackwood family case represents one of the most extreme examples of genetic isolation documented in modern America. Their practice of close relative unions over multiple generations created a catastrophic concentration of recessive genes. The consequences were painfully evident in the children born within the family. Medical records obtained after the authorities' intervention documented numerous cases of developmental delays, skeletal malformations, heart defects, and compromised immune systems. Perhaps most tragic were the psychological conditions that manifested. Many children displayed significant cognitive impairments, while others exhibited behaviors suggesting severe psychological trauma. Sarah Jenkins, a nurse who assisted with medical evaluations when the family was discovered, recalled, "I'll never forget examining those children. Beyond the physical symptoms, there was something in their eyes, a combination of confusion and profound sadness. They had no concept of the outside world. Some of the older ones flinched at every movement, suggesting years of mistreatment. The women's situation was equally disturbing. Those designated as bearers were subjected to a life focused entirely around reproduction. They received slightly better nutrition than others but were kept in conditions of extreme psychological control. Most had begun bearing children in their early teens, with some having delivered as many as 8 children by their mid-20s. Margaret Blackwood, whose visit to Dr. Reynolds had triggered the investigation, was one of these women. As the daughter of Jeremiah's sister, she had been designated as a primary bearer at age 14. Her attempt to seek medical help represented a rare moment of resistance in a lifetime of subjugation. County historian Walter Brooks provided context for how such isolation was possible. The Blackwoods owned nearly 200 acres of densely forested land. The nearest neighbor was over 3 miles away, and the family deliberately spread rumors about dangerous hunting traps and unstable ground to discourage trespassers. In that era, with limited communication and a cultural tendency to respect privacy in these rural areas, a family could effectively disappear if they chose to. The most heartbreaking aspect of the Blackwood case emerged as the women began to share their experiences. After being relocated to a specialized care facility, 5 of the adult women eventually provided testimonies that revealed the psychological manipulation used to maintain the family's structure. Emma Blackwood, who was 32 when authorities discovered the family, had lived her entire life within the compound. Her testimony revealed the indoctrination process. From when we were small, they separated us girls. Some were told they would be kitchen women or field women, but those of us with what they called the strong Blackwood features were prepared differently. They taught us that our purpose was sacred to carry forward the pure blood. We were told the outside world was corrupt and would poison our bloodlines, the family maintained. Control through a combination of isolation, religious manipulation, and punishment. Women who questioned their roles or attempted to resist were subjected to confinement in a small outbuilding they called the reflection room, where they would be kept for days with minimal food until they accepted their purpose. Rebecca Blackwood, who was 26 and had given birth to 4 children, described the psychological conditioning. They had this ceremony when we turned 13. The men would decide our purpose, and if you were chosen as a bearer, you were given a special pendant, a simple wooden disc with a tree carved into it. We were taught to feel proud of this selection, that we were preserving something precious. It's only now that I understand how wrong it all was. If you feel your heart breaking for these women who never knew freedom, type "they deserved better" in the comments below. Your words acknowledge their suffering and help ensure these hidden historical atrocities are never forgotten. The physical and emotional toll on these women was severe. Medical examinations showed that many suffered from nutritional deficiencies, untreated chronic conditions, and injuries consistent with physical mistreatment. The repeated pregnancies, often beginning in adolescence and continuing without adequate recovery time, had caused lasting damage to their bodies. Dr. Catherine Powell, a psychiatrist who worked with the women, noted, beyond the physical trauma, these women suffered complex psychological damage. They had been raised in an environment where their entire identity and self-worth were tied to reproduction. When removed from this context, many experienced severe identity crises. They had no concept of individual choice or autonomy. Perhaps most disturbing was how the family structure perpetuated itself. Older bearer women were eventually reassigned as guides responsible for teaching and conditioning younger girls for their future roles. This created a system where victims became unwitting participants in continuing the cycle of mistreatment. Margaret Blackwood, whose courage in seeking outside help ultimately led to the family's discovery, provided the most complete testimony. I knew something was wrong when my 3rd child was born with severe problems. The older women told me it was because I hadn't been pure enough in my thoughts, but I'd seen the same problems in other children. When my sister's daughter died at just 4 months old with similar symptoms, something broke in me. I waited for my chance and took my youngest to find help. The investigation into the Blackwood family revealed a disturbing ideological framework that had evolved over generations to justify their practices. Law enforcement discovered a leather-bound book in Jeremiah Blackwood's quarters titled The Preservation, which detailed the family's beliefs and rules. The doctrine appeared to have originated with Elijah Blackwood during the 1930s, who combined distorted religious concepts, misunderstood genetics, and response to economic hardship into a twisted philosophy. The book contained passages claiming that the Blackwood lineage possessed special qualities that would be diminished through mixing with lesser bloodlines. Historical researcher Martin Davidson explained, "The timing is significant. The Great Depression hit rural communities like Monroe County particularly hard. Many families lost farms that had been in their families for generations. Evidence suggests Elijah Blackwood was deeply affected by seeing neighboring families forced to leave their ancestral lands. His response was to create an extreme form of self-sufficiency and isolation. The doctrine established a rigid hierarchy within the family. At the top were keepers, male relatives who made all decisions and rarely engaged in physical labor. Below them were various categories of workers and, most disturbingly, the vessels, female relatives selected for reproduction based on physical characteristics and temperament." The book contained detailed rules for maintaining this system, including instructions for identifying suitable vessels among female children, methods of indoctrination, and even a calendar system for managing reproductive cycles. The clinical, detached language used to describe human beings revealed a profound dehumanization at the core of the family structure. Professor Elaine Richards, who studied cult behaviors in isolated communities, noted parallels to other closed groups. "What makes the Blackwood case particularly disturbing is how they created a complete alternative reality. Unlike many cults centered around a charismatic leader, this was a multi-generational system that had become self-sustaining. Each generation was raised with no concept that their reality was abnormal. When authorities arrested Jeremiah Blackwood, then 51 years old, and 3 other adult male relatives, they discovered the extent of the family's preparation for maintaining isolation. The property included extensive food storage facilities, workshops for repairing equipment, and even a small classroom where children were taught a heavily altered version of history and science designed to reinforce family doctrine. Perhaps most chilling were Jeremiah's final words upon arrest, recorded by Deputy James Wilson. "You think you're saving them, but you're destroying what took generations to perfect. The outside world is the real abomination. Our way preserves what matters." When the Blackwood case finally reached court in 1974, it sent shockwaves through West Virginia and eventually gained national attention. Jeremiah and 3 other male relatives faced multiple charges related to their treatment of family members. Due to the unusual nature of the case and the era's limited legal framework for addressing such situations, prosecutors relied primarily on charges of unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, and various abuse statutes. The legal proceedings were complicated by the victims' limited ability to function in mainstream society and their deep indoctrination. Many still viewed their abusers as protectors and struggled to understand why their way of life was considered wrong. Judge William Hartford, who presided over the case, later wrote in his memoirs, "In my 30 years on the bench, no case disturbed me more deeply than the Blackwood family. The systematic way they had destroyed the autonomy and humanity of their own relatives represented a level of calculated cruelty that haunted everyone involved in the proceedings." Jeremiah Blackwood was sentenced to 40 years in prison, where he died in 1985, reportedly still believing in his family's doctrine until the end. The other men received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. For the women and children, the aftermath brought new challenges. A specialized rehabilitation program was established at a facility near Charleston, where they received medical treatment, education, and psychological support. Progress was slow and difficult. Social worker Deborah Mitchell, who worked with the family members for over a decade, documented their journey. The younger children adapted more readily, though many faced ongoing health and developmental challenges. For the adult women, particularly those who had been vessels, the transition was extremely difficult. They had no concept of making choices for themselves, no education, and no experience of normal social interaction. 5 years after their discovery, 12 of the younger Blackwood children had been placed in adoptive homes, though many required ongoing specialized care. Some of the adult women eventually achieved semi-independent living in supervised settings, while others required lifelong support. Margaret Blackwood, whose act of courage had exposed the family's situation, struggled with profound guilt despite being reassured that she had saved many lives. She eventually became an advocate for abuse survivors and contributed to educational programs for social workers dealing with cult survivors. The Blackwood case led to significant changes in how authorities approached isolated communities and potential familial mistreatment. West Virginia implemented new protocols for monitoring remote properties where children might be present, and training programs were developed to help social service workers identify signs of similar situations. The property itself, with its dark history, was eventually seized by the county due to tax delinquency. After debate about what should be done with the land, officials decided to demolish all structures and allow the forest to reclaim the area. Today, nothing remains of the Blackwood compound except overgrown foundations hidden beneath decades of forest growth. As a final note to this disturbing chapter in American history, Dr. Powell, who continued to work with survivors until her retirement in 1997, offered this reflection: the Blackwood case reminds us how fragile human dignity can be when isolation and distorted belief systems take hold. Yet it also shows the remarkable resilience of the human spirit. Some of those children, born into unimaginable circumstances, eventually built meaningful lives. That represents a victory over the darkness that was intended to define them. If you've watched until this point, it's because you connected with this powerful story. Leave a comment saying I watched until the end, so I can get to know you and understand who truly appreciates the important historical investigations on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit like and share this video with others who appreciate uncovering the hidden truths of our past. These forgotten stories deserve to be acknowledged, no matter how uncomfortable they make us feel.